It was nearly 7 in the evening when the school hallways finally fell quiet. The lights in the long corridor flickered softly, casting long shadows across the empty floor. Most of the staff had already gone home, and the last few students rushed out the exit with their backpacks swinging behind them. Only one person was left moving slowly through the silence. Pushing a cleaning cart, it squeaked a little with every turn. Her name was Lena. She kept her head slightly down as she swept the floor. Not because she disliked her job, but because she preferred staying unnoticed. She worked steadily, moving from classroom to classroom, wiping desks, emptying bins, gathering lost pencils from under chairs. She didn't complain, and she didn't try to draw attention to herself. But sometimes, especially at the end of the day, her eyes wandered toward one place she wished she could go without worry, the school auditorium. Inside that dim, wide space stood the old grand piano. Its polished wood caught every bit of light, even when the room was dark. Lena passed by it every evening because her cleaning route always ended there. And every time, she felt the same familiar pull in her chest. The piano wasn't just an instrument to her. It was a memory, a dream she once held tightly, but had slowly pushed aside as life grew complicated. She pushed open the auditorium door, and it made a gentle creak. Her cart followed behind her, wheels rolling quietly on the old wooden floor. The large room felt peaceful at this hour. Chairs were stacked neatly to one side, and the stage lights were off except for the faint glow from a small lamp near the wall. She breathed in softly, appreciating the stillness. Her work here was simple. Sweep the stage, dust the piano surface, check for litter, and turn off the last few lights before leaving. But today, just like most evenings, her steps slowed the moment she neared the piano. She placed the broom against the wall and walked closer. She reached out her hand, hesitating for a second. She didn't even need to press the keys. Sometimes just feeling the smooth edge of the piano made her heart beat differently. She gently touched one of the keys with the tip of her finger, barely letting it move. It made the faintest sound, almost like a whisper. She smiled softly. She couldn't help it. It reminded her of when she used to play as a child, sitting in his small living room with a second-hand keyboard her father had managed to buy from a neighbor. It had been old, missing 2 keys, and the stickers were peeling off. But she had loved it as if it were the finest instrument in the world. That little keyboard was where she spent hours practicing scales, learning songs from memory, and trying to play pieces she heard on the radio. Her father used to sit nearby, listening with tired eyes but a proud smile. Lena never forgot that look. It was one of the reasons she kept playing back. Then it made him happy. But life had changed. Bills grew heavier. Her father's health weakened. Lena had to find work early, and playing the piano became something she did only in moments of silence. Moments like this, when no one was watching. She pressed another key, this time just enough to let the note ring a little. It echoed softly through the empty room, warm and delicate. She sighed, wishing she could sit down and play just one real song, one full melody. It had been so long since she allowed herself to play more than a quiet note here. And there, suddenly, the auditorium door swung open. The loud sound made Lena jump. She quickly pulled her hand away from the piano, as if it burned her. A tall man walked into the room, carrying a stack of papers tucked under his arm. His steps were sharp, and his eyes looked tired. It was Mr. Halden, the school's music teacher. He didn't usually stay this late, but today he was rushing through paperwork for an upcoming community recital. When he looked up and saw Lena near the piano, his expression tightened. "What are you doing?" he asked, not harshly at first, but in a tone that suggested she shouldn't be there. Lena stepped back quickly. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just cleaning. I'm almost done." He walked closer, his footsteps echoing. "The piano isn't part of your cleaning duties inside," he said. "Just the outside. And please don't touch the keys. They're delicate, and this piano is an important instrument for the recital next week." His voice was firm now. He assumed she had no reason to be near the piano, except maybe out of curiosity. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know that she understood the instrument better than some of his own students. Lena swallowed her embarrassment and gave a small nod. "Yes, sir. Of course. I'm sorry." Mr. Halden didn't seem angry, just protective of the piano. He stacked his papers on top of it before realizing that wasn't the best place and moved them again. He glanced at Lena, perhaps realizing he might have sounded too sharp. But instead of correcting himself, he simply said, "Just finish up and lock the door when you're done. I have to take care of something in the office." "Yes, sir," she replied quietly. He left as quickly as he had come, and the door shut behind him. The room felt even more silent than before, like the piano itself had gone still. Lena inhaled deeply, letting the moment settle. She didn't hold anger toward him. She knew teachers were protective of their instruments, and she didn't want to cause trouble. Still, something inside her felt a little cracked. She hadn't meant to overstep. She hadn't meant to do anything wrong at all. She picked up her broom again and pushed it gently across the stage floor. Her movements were slower now, thoughtful. The earlier softness she felt when touching the piano had faded into something heavier as she swept. She kept thinking about why she always stopped near the piano in the first place. It wasn't because she wanted to claim it. It wasn't because she wanted to play it without permission. It was because music still lived somewhere inside her. Even if she hadn't allowed it to shine in years. She finished sweeping the stage and wiped the dust from the piano's surface, careful not to touch any keys, as she had been told. She worked with gentle movements, almost giving the instrument its own kind of respect. When her tasks were done, she pulled the cart toward the exit. Before leaving, she turned back once more. The piano sat silently under the lamplight, almost waiting for someone to bring it to life. Lena whispered in her mind, not daring to say it out loud. Maybe one day. She closed the auditorium door softly behind her. On the other side of the door, she didn't know that moments like this often lead to something unexpected. She didn't know that the same teacher who warned her would one day hear her play, and everything he believed about her would change. For now, Lena simply pushed her cart down the hallway, ready to finish the last bit of cleaning before heading home. She didn't expect anything more from life than quiet work and small memories. But life, in its quiet way, was already preparing a surprise she couldn't imagine yet. The empty school, the piano, and the echo of a single soft note she had played earlier. Those were the beginning of something bigger, something waiting just around the corner. The night was quiet when Lena finally stepped out of the school building. The cool air brushed against her face as she walked across the small parking lot, her bag hanging loosely from her shoulder. She felt tired more than usual, but it wasn't the kind of tired that came from physical work. It was the kind that came from holding back something you loved for too long. She reached the bus stop at the corner of the street and sat on the metal bench. The street light above her flickered softly, buzzing now and then. She hugged her sweater a little tighter and thought about the moment earlier when Mr. Halden walked in. She didn't blame him for what he said, but the words still replayed in her mind like a quiet echo. "Don't touch the keys." She tried to shake it off. She wasn't supposed to touch the piano anyway. She knew that. She was there to clean, not to play. But deep inside, a small part of her still felt the sting of it. A small part of her that remembered a different version of herself, one who didn't have to hide her love for music. When the bus arrived, she climbed inside and took a seat near the window. The ride was peaceful, only a few people scattered inside. She looked out the window at the passing streetlights, letting her thoughts drift backward in time. She remembered the tiny apartment where she grew up, the one with the uneven floor and the window that wouldn't close properly during winter. The air used to be cold, but her father always found a way to keep the place warm enough. He worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs at once, just to keep food on the table. Yet no matter how long his day had been, he always came home with a soft smile when he saw her sitting at the keyboard. Lena could almost hear his voice now, tired but warm. "Play something for me," he used to say. And she always did. She played whatever she had learned that day. Even if it was just a simple scale or a small tune, she made up Dot. Those memories felt like a world far away now. Her father had always encouraged her dreams, especially the dream of learning music properly. He saved money little by little to enroll her in music lessons with a teacher who lived 2 streets away. The lessons were short, only once every 2 weeks, but to Lena, they meant everything. She practiced every day, hoping to show her teacher real improvement. Her teacher used to tell her that she had a natural touch, that she played gently, with emotion, even when she didn't fully understand the theory behind the notes. Lena tucked those words deep inside her heart. They were the kind of words that kept her going, even when she doubted herself. But everything changed the year her father got sick. It started with small things, days when he seemed more tired than usual, evenings when he said his chest felt heavy. Then it got worse. Hospital visits became more frequent, and bills began piling up. Lena had no choice. She dropped her lessons, saying she needed more time for school, but the truth was, the family couldn't afford them anymore. Within a year, she stopped playing altogether. Not because she wanted to, but because surviving became more important. She took her first job at a grocery store, and later, a job cleaning offices. Eventually, she accepted the janitor position at the school because it offered steady hours and a quiet environment. She didn't mind the work. It was honest work. But every time she saw a piano or heard music drifting from one of the classrooms, something inside her stirred. She closed her eyes now, letting the rhythm of the moving bus settle her. Even though she tried to bury her love for music, she couldn't erase it. She had carried it around like a small glowing ember all these years. When her stop arrived, she stepped down and began walking home. The streets were dim and peaceful. She lived in a small building on the edge of town, an older place with cracked walls and narrow staircases. Inside her apartment, she placed her bag on the table and heated a small cup of tea. As she sat on the edge of her bed, she let her thoughts return to the school piano. How smooth its keys felt, how soft the sound was, even when she barely pressed down. It made her remember everything she'd tried to forget. She wondered what would have happened if life had been different, if her father hadn't gotten sick, if she had been able to keep taking lessons, if she had been able to perform somewhere like she once hoped. She could almost imagine herself on a small stage, playing something beautiful, something she wrote herself. But reality was different. She had responsibilities now, and dreams didn't pay bills. Still, that old piano in the auditorium had awakened something she hadn't felt in a long time. Something quiet but persistent, like a small voice whispering that maybe it wasn't too late. The next morning, Lena arrived at the school earlier than usual. She always liked getting there before everyone else. The silence made it easier to think. She walked through the halls, unlocking each room and preparing her tools. She didn't expect anything unusual today. She planned to do her work, stay out of sight, and keep her distance from the piano like she had promised. But as the day went on, the memory of touching the keys didn't leave her. It followed her from room to room like a gentle shadow. During lunch break, she sat outside on a bench near the playground. The weather was warm, and a soft breeze moved through the trees. Children laughed in the distance. and the sound of their joy made her smile. She watched them play, their energy filling the air. She didn't notice Mr. Halden walking past until he stopped a few steps away. "Lena," he said, clearing his throat. She looked up quickly, surprised he even knew her name. "Yes, sir?" "I wanted to say, I didn't mean to sound harsh last night," he said, shifting awkwardly. "I was just worried about the piano. It's old and needs careful handling. I wasn't trying to make you feel bad." Lena nodded politely, holding her hands together in her lap. "It's all right, sir." "I understand." He seemed relieved by her calm response, but there was still something else behind his eyes, something like curiosity. He hesitated before speaking again. "I thought I heard a note when I walked in yesterday," he said. "Were you trying to play something?" Her heart tightened. She shook her head quickly. "No, sir. It was an accident. I was just wiping the surface, and my hand slipped." He nodded slowly, though he didn't look entirely convinced. "All right. Well, thank you for taking care of the auditorium. It looked good this morning." "Thank you," she whispered. He walked away, leaving her with a strange feeling. She didn't lie completely. She hadn't been trying to play a full piece, but she also hadn't told the full truth. She didn't want anyone to know she still cared about music. It felt too personal, too fragile to talk about. When her break was over, she returned to work. She spent the afternoon cleaning classrooms, dusting shelves, and sweeping hallways. She kept her thoughts to herself, but inside, her heart felt unsettled. At the end of the day, her cleaning route once again led her to the auditorium. She opened the door slowly, half expecting someone to be inside, but the room was empty. The piano sat in the same quiet place, waiting. She stood still for a long moment, the broom in her hand. She remembered her promise, and she knew she shouldn't go near it. But she also felt something she hadn't felt in years, the longing to reconnect with the music she used to love. She took a slow step toward the piano, then stopped herself. She took another step back, shaking her head. "No," she whispered to herself. "It's better if I don't." She returned to sweeping, but her eyes kept drifting toward the instrument. The silence of the room felt heavier today, filled with memories, filled with unspoken hopes. Lena finished her tasks and walked toward the door. But before she left, she glanced back once more. She couldn't help the small smile that appeared on her face. She whispered quietly, "Maybe another day." Then she turned off the lights and closed the door behind her, unaware that life was slowly pushing her toward a moment she would never forget. The next morning began like any other, but something in the air felt different. Lena couldn't quite explain it. Maybe it was the way the sun came through her small kitchen window, or maybe it was the memory of the piano lingering in her mind. She got ready for work the same way she always did, tying her hair back, packing her lunch, and grabbing her sweater before heading out the door. The bus ride was quiet, filled with the usual mix of early workers and sleepy students. Lena sat near the window again, watching the world pass by in blurry colors. She didn't know why she felt so restless, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the auditorium, to the smooth keys beneath her fingertips, to the note she had played without meaning to. It was strange how a single sound could bring back years of memories. When she arrived at the school, she headed straight to her cleaning station. She always liked to start early before the hallways filled with noise. She went through the motions, mopping floors, organizing supplies, but her mind wasn't fully there. She kept replaying her conversation with Mr. Halden from the day before. He had seemed curious, almost suspicious, but not unkind. It was the first time he'd spoken to her directly in more than a quick greeting. She wondered what he was thinking when he asked if she had tried to play. Part of her wished she had told him the truth, but another part was glad she didn't. She wasn't ready for anyone to know that music still lived. Somewhere inside her dot, when the school day officially started, Lena stepped aside as students rushed through the corridors. They were full of energy, laughter, and anxious chatter about tests and morning assemblies. She moved through the crowd quietly, pushing her cart as she headed toward the far wing of the building. During the late morning hours, she worked near the music rooms. She could hear the sound of instruments drifting through the doors' violins tuning, a group of students practicing scales, and even a few off-key notes from beginners trying to find the right pitch. She paused for a moment outside one of the rooms, listening to a soft piano melody being practiced inside. Her heart tightened. She walked away quickly before the memories overwhelmed her again, dot around noon. The principal's voice came over the loudspeaker, announcing a reminder about the community recital scheduled for the weekend. Lena didn't think much of it at first. She knew it was meant for parents and students, not for her. But as she worked, she overheard two teachers talking near the staff room. The first teacher said, "I heard the guest performer might cancel. That's the third time this month. Why is it so hard to get someone reliable for these events?" The second replied, "I don't know. And poor Halden is stressed out. He's trying to get everything ready for the donors coming that day. If the recital falls apart, he'll never hear the end of it." Lena paused in the hallway, pretending to adjust the supplies on her cart while quietly listening. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the conversation felt strangely connected to the tension she sensed the previous day. After lunch break, she continued her duties, but the sense of unease grew. She couldn't explain why. It was just a feeling, like something important was about to happen. Later that afternoon, Lena walked into the auditorium with her cleaning cart as usual. She expected it to be empty, but instead she found a group of students on stage. They were practicing a short piece for the recital, though most of them looked distracted. Some were whispering to each other, others staring into the audience seats. Mr. Halden stood in front of them, arms crossed, his face tense. "No, no, no," he said, walking toward one of the students. "You're coming in too early. You need to wait for the cue." The boy sighed and nodded, clearly frustrated. Lena quietly moved to the corner, trying to stay out of the way as she began to wipe down some chairs. She didn't want to disturb the practice, but she also couldn't leave until her work was done. From where she stood, she could tell something was wrong. The students were struggling, and the music sounded messy. The piece they were practicing needed coordination, and the absence of a strong lead performer was obvious. After a few minutes, the group tried again, but the result wasn't much better. The melody fell apart halfway through, and several students exchanged anxious looks. "We're not ready," one of them muttered. "We have to be ready," another whispered back. Tension in the room grew heavier when the practice fell apart for the third time. Mr. Halden rubbed his forehead and sighed deeply. "All right, take 5 minutes. Just breathe." The students stepped off the stage, some grabbing water bottles, others sitting down in the front row. Lena kept her head low, not wanting to draw any attention. A moment later, she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up to see Mr. Halden standing near her cart. "Oh, good afternoon, sir," she said quietly, unsure if she was blocking his way. He nodded slightly, though his expression remained troubled. "Hello. Sorry if we're in the way. It's been a long day." "It's all right, sir," she replied softly. "I can come back later if you need the room." "No, no, it's fine," he said. Then, after a pause, he added, "Do you ever watch music performances?" His question surprised her. She wasn't sure how to answer. "Sometimes," she said carefully. "Not recently, but I used to when I was younger." He nodded as if something clicked in his mind. "We're preparing for the recital. It's an important event this year. Donors are visiting, and the school depends on their support." Lena listened quietly, unsure why he was telling her this. We had a lead performer lined up, he continued. But I just got news this morning that he won't be able to make it. That leaves us in a difficult position, as the piece we planned needs someone with strong technique. I'm sorry to hear that, she said, genuinely feeling his frustration. He let out a slow breath. It happens, I suppose. But the timing couldn't be worse. Lena didn't know what to say. She wanted to comfort him, but she also didn't want to overstep Dot after a moment. He glanced toward the stage, then back at her. His eyes held a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. You know, he said slowly, yesterday, when I walked in, I thought I heard something. A real note, not an accidental one. Her heartbeat quickened. She lowered her gaze, pretending to adjust the cloth in her hand. It was nothing, sir, she murmured. I didn't mean to play anything. I was just cleaning like always. He studied her for a moment, but didn't push further. Well, he said finally, I should get them back on stage. He walked away, calling the students together. But Lena felt his eyes on her once more before he reached the stage. She finished her cleaning duties as quietly as possible and left the room before the practice resumed. Dot as she walked down the hallway. Her heart still felt uneasy. She didn't like attention. She didn't want anyone questioning her. She had spent years blending into the background, doing her work quietly, letting her dreams sit in the corner of her mind, where no one could touch them. But now something was shifting. Later that day, when the students left and the halls grew quiet again, Lena returned to the auditorium to finish the last bit of cleaning. She stepped inside slowly, listening to see if anyone was there. The room was empty. The stage lights were off. The piano stood quietly under the soft glow of evening light coming through the high windows. She walked toward it, her footsteps gentle on the wooden floor. She hesitated, staring at the keys. She remembered how the sound had echoed yesterday, how it had awakened something inside her. Dot. She reached out her hand again, just like she had before. But this time, she didn't stop herself. She pressed a single key, letting the note ring out clearly. Then another dot, then a soft sequence of 3 notes that flowed naturally from her fingers, as if they had been waiting for this moment. The sound was delicate, warm, honest. Dot for a moment. She forgot about everything, her worries, her job, her past. It was just her, and the music she had missed so much. She closed her eyes and let her fingers move on their own, playing a small melody she remembered from childhood. It wasn't perfect, and she didn't care. It felt real. Dot, but what Lena didn't know was that she wasn't alone. Standing quietly in the doorway was Mr. Halden. He had returned to the auditorium to pick up a folder he forgot. But what he heard as he approached the door stopped him in his tracks. He stood frozen, listening to the gentle music filling the room. The same janitor he told not to touch the piano was now playing with a grace he rarely saw, even in his most dedicated students. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He just watched her play, his entire understanding of her shifting with every note. And Lena, unaware of the pair of eyes on her, continued playing softly, her heart finally speaking through her fingertips. The next few days felt different for everyone in the school, but no one felt the change as deeply as the janitor. After that unexpected moment in the music room, she carried a quiet energy around her. It wasn't pride, and it wasn't excitement. It was something softer, almost like a hope she didn't dare express out loud. She kept working as she always had, moving through the halls with her mop and bucket, keeping everything neat and welcoming. But whenever she passed by the music room, she felt something shift in her chest, that it wasn't easy for her to deal with the attention that had started coming her way. The moment had been private between her and the teacher, or at least that's how she wanted it to be. But schools have a way of letting news travel, even when no one tries to spread it. Students who had seen her piano playing peeked into hallways to see if she was nearby. Teachers whispered among themselves, not out of gossip, but out of confusion and wonder. And the music teacher who had once taken the piano so seriously found himself watching her with a different kind of respect he hadn't expected to feel. People will talk, she thought more than once while wiping down a row of lockers. They always do. But it doesn't mean I have to listen. She tried to stay grounded in her work, focusing on the tasks that gave her structure. The rhythmic motions of cleaning helped settle her mind. Still, one thought kept returning. The piano, the way it felt beneath her fingers, and the expression on the teacher's face when she had played. One afternoon, while she was finishing up mopping near the music room, she heard soft notes drifting from inside. They were hesitant, almost searching. She paused, leaning slightly toward the door. The teacher was practicing alone. The melody was a familiar one she had played before, but he seemed to be struggling with the expression of it. Not the notes themselves, but the emotion it needed. She stood quietly for a moment, listening. She knew the piece well, not because she had studied it, but because it had been one of the few songs she loved to play back when life was calmer for her. She remembered long evenings when the world outside felt heavy, but music made things feel lighter. The song stopped abruptly. Then she heard a chair scrape back, followed by a soft sigh. She realized she had been standing there too long. She turned to walk away, but just then the teacher stepped out. He blinked in surprise when he saw her. "Oh, I didn't realize anyone was outside. I was just finishing cleaning this hallway," she said, gripping the handle of the mop a little firmer. He paused, then smiled faintly. "You know this piece well, don't you?" She stayed quiet for a moment. "I used to play it," she finally answered. He nodded, looking down at his shoes for a second before meeting her eyes again. "Would you?" He stopped, unsure how to word it. "Would you mind coming in for a moment?" Her first instinct was to refuse. Not because she didn't want to play, but because stepping into that room again meant opening a door she wasn't sure she could walk through a second time. But the teacher's expression wasn't demanding or patronizing. It was humble, even a little vulnerable. She took a slow breath. "Just for a minute," she said, inside the room. The piano sat waiting like an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years. She approached it carefully, almost cautiously, and sat on the bench. The teacher watched her from the side, not too close, not too far, giving her space. "Play it," he said softly. She placed her hands on the keys, letting her fingers find the shape of the melody again. At first she played quietly, but as the familiar pathway of the song opened up, something inside her unlocked. The notes grew smoother, warmer, more alive. The teacher closed his eyes as he listened. He wasn't thinking about technique or form anymore. He was thinking about the story her hands were telling, one he could feel but not name. When she finished, silence filled the room. "That," he said finally, "is what I've been missing." She looked at him, confused. "Missing?" "In the music," he said. "In the way I teach. In the way I've been listening." She looked away, unsure what to do with the compliment. "I only played what I felt." "And that," he said, "is exactly what makes it real." She stood up then, brushing her hands against her clothes as if to shake off the moment. "I should get back to work." "Wait," he said, taking a step toward her. "Can I ask you something?" She paused. "What is it?" "Would you be willing to help me with the music club? Just once a week. Nothing formal." She stared at him, shocked. "You want me to teach students?" "No," he said quickly. "Not teach. Just guide. Inspire them. Show them what it means to feel music, not just play it." She hesitated. It felt like a strange request, one she wasn't sure she deserved. She was just the janitor, the one who worked quietly in the background. the one people barely noticed. "I'm not trained," she said softly. "I'm not a real musician." "You're exactly the kind of musician they need," he replied. Her heart thumped in her chest. She wasn't ready for something like this. But she also couldn't deny that something inside her warmed at the idea. "Let me think about it," she said. "Of course," he replied, stepping back to give her space. "Take all the time you need." Over the next few days, the teacher tried his best not to pressure her. He kept his distance, respecting her silence, though he looked hopeful whenever their paths crossed. Meanwhile, the students seemed to sense something different around her. It wasn't that they treated her like someone special, but they watched her with curious eyes, noticing the quiet light that had settled around her. On Friday afternoon, while cleaning the cafeteria, she overheard two students talking. One of them was excitedly telling the other about the upcoming music club performance. "Do you think we're ready?" One asked nervously. "We have to be," the other said. "The teacher said he's preparing something different this time." She paused mid-wipe. Something different. She wondered if that had anything to do with her dot later that day. As she walked home, the teacher's offer replayed in her mind, like a song she couldn't forget. She remembered how it felt to sit at the piano again, how the music had moved through her. She had missed that feeling more than she realized. That evening, after finishing her simple dinner, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her hands. She had once believed she could do something with her talent, but life had taken her in a different direction. Responsibilities had replaced dreams. Work had replaced music, but now, maybe she had a chance to share something meaningful again. The next Monday morning, she arrived at school earlier than usual. The hallways were empty, echoing with the soft hum of lights. She made her way toward the music room. Her steps slowed the closer she got. She stopped outside the door, gathering the courage to knock. The teacher looked up when she entered. His eyes widened in a hopeful question. She exhaled. "I'll help," she said. A smile spread across his face, not a triumphant smile, not one of victory, but one of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," he said quietly. The journey wasn't going to be easy for her. She knew that. She knew there would be doubts, insecurities, moments when she wondered if she belonged there at all. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. Purpose. And she didn't know it yet. But saying yes would change more than just her days. It would change her life, and the lives of the students who were about to learn more from her than they ever expected. The first session of the music club, after she agreed to help, arrived faster than she expected. As she walked toward the music room that afternoon, she felt her steps slow. She had told the teacher she would help, but now that the moment was real, she felt a familiar nervousness settling in her chest. She was not used to standing in front of people. She was not used to people expecting something from her. She paused outside the door, hearing the chatter of students inside. They were laughing, practicing short melodies, and tapping on desks with pencils. For a moment, she almost turned around. But then she remembered the feeling she had when she played a few days earlier. The warmth, the freedom, the sense that something inside her had come back to life. She took a slow breath and pushed. The door opened. The room felt quieter than she expected. Students who were usually loud paused, watching her with curious eyes. Some of them smiled politely. Others seemed confused. Most of them simply waited. The teacher stepped forward with a gentle smile. "Everyone, this is our new helper. She's joining us today." There was no applause or dramatic reaction, just nods and quiet interest. But that was enough for her. The teacher turned to her. "Would you like to start? Maybe say a few words?" She shook her head quickly. "I'd rather play," she said softly. He nodded with full understanding. "Of course. Go ahead." She moved to the piano, this time by choice, not by accident. She sat down and let her fingers rest on the keys. The students leaned forward a little, sensing something was about to happen. She didn't play anything big or loud. Instead, she chose a simple melody, one she had always believed even beginners could understand. The notes flowed softly at first, then grew smoother, filling the room with a gentle calm. It wasn't a show. It wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to speak. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then a student in the front row whispered, "That was beautiful." Others nodded. Some smiled. A few looked stunned. The teacher looked more proud of her than he had any right to be. She stood up slowly. "I don't have big lessons," she said quietly. "I don't know the names of everything you learn in books. All I know is, music feels different when it's honest. If you only play the notes, people hear sound. But if you play what you feel, people hear you." The students listened closely. Some of them were used to technical lessons, proper posture, correct fingering, reading sheets properly. But hearing something emotional, something so simple, yet so true, felt like a new kind of lesson. A student raised her hand. "Can you show us how to do that?" She paused. She had never taught anyone before, but she nodded. "Let's try." For the next hour, she walked around the room, listening to them play. She didn't correct their technique. She didn't talk about mistakes. Instead, she asked them questions. "What were you thinking when you played that part? What feeling do you want this piece to have? How would you play it if you were telling a story?" The students seemed surprised by the questions at first, but slowly they began opening up, experimenting with softer touches, slower tempos, or deeper breaths before starting a new phrase. And something amazing happened. Their music sounded different, more real, less rushed, more meaningful. The teacher watched all of this from the side of the room, almost stunned. He had always believed in structure, in training, in rules. He had always taken his role very seriously. But seeing the students play with heart, seeing the janitor guide them with kindness instead of pressure, taught him something he had forgotten. Music was not just skill. It was connection. When the session ended, the students gathered around her. "Will you come back next week?" One asked. "Please." Another added. She nodded. "If the teacher is okay with it?" The teacher stepped forward quickly. "Of course I am." Their smiles warmed her heart. She left the room that day feeling lighter than she had felt in years. But with each step down the hallway, another feeling crept in, a small fear. What if I disappoint them someday? What if I can't help them the way they think I can? She pushed the thoughts aside for now. Some things were better faced when they came. The next week, she returned to help again. Each session, the students grew a little more comfortable with her. They began opening up about their struggles, not just musical ones, but worries about school, friendships, and home. She listened with patience, offering gentle advice when she could, and silence when that was what they needed. The teacher was grateful for her presence. He felt the students changing, growing more confident. They practiced more. They cared more. They began arriving early, eager to learn. One afternoon, after a particularly good session, the teacher approached her. "You know," he said, "the students want to include a special piece in the school's spring concert. Something emotional, something meaningful. They asked if you would play with them." Her eyes widened. "Me? On stage?" He nodded. "They say the music feels different when you're part of it." She shook her head quickly. "I can't. I'm just—" He held up a hand gently. "You're not just anything. You're someone who changed the whole club. And they want you there because of that." But she couldn't accept the idea so easily. She had spent years believing she wasn't meant to be seen. Her place had always been behind the scenes, keeping things running while others stood in the spotlight. I need time to think, she said. Of course, he replied softly. For days, she thought about it. While sweeping hallways, while wiping desks, while locking up classrooms at the end of the day. The idea scared her, not because she didn't want to play, but because she didn't believe she belonged on a stage anymore. One evening, she stayed after her shift to clean the auditorium. The empty seats stretched out before her, rows and rows of silent faces waiting for stories. The stage looked huge, bigger than she remembered. She walked slowly up the steps and stood in the center. What am I doing here? She whispered. Her voice sounded so small in the vast room. She imagined the students standing beside her, playing with hope and nerves, trusting her to guide them. She imagined the teacher watching from the wings, proud and supportive. She imagined the audience listening. And for a moment, she imagined herself playing not as a janitor, not as someone who had tucked away her dreams, but as someone who still had something to give. The image softened her heart. She sat at the edge of the stage, letting her feet dangle. The quiet of the room seemed to wrap around her. Maybe she didn't need to be perfect. Maybe she just needed to be present. The next day, she found the teacher during lunch. I'll do it, she said. He smiled, deeply relieved. Thank you. Rehearsals for the concert began immediately. The students practiced harder than ever. They wanted to impress her. They wanted to make her proud. And she worked alongside them, guiding them with patience and warmth. The teacher watched the transformation of the club with amazement. It wasn't just their music that had improved. It was their confidence, their teamwork, their joy. One afternoon during rehearsal, the teacher approached her quietly. You've given them something I never could. She looked at him, surprised. What do you mean? You gave them courage, he said. You taught them to feel, not just perform. She shook her head, embarrassed. I didn't do anything special. He smiled gently. Sometimes the most special things look simple. His words stayed with her long after rehearsal ended, but not everything was smooth. As the concert date approached, pressure began to grow. Some students got nervous. Others worried they weren't good enough. The teacher worked hard to keep them focused, but the tension lingered. One student in particular, who usually played confidently, began making mistakes out of fear. She noticed it immediately. She sat beside him at the piano and said softly, "Close your eyes." He hesitated but obeyed. "Now breathe," she said. He took a shaky breath. "Forget the audience. Forget the stage. Play it like you're telling me a secret." He played. The notes were shaky at first, but gradually they grew steady, warm, honest. When he finished, he opened his eyes. "I can do it," he whispered. She nodded. "You already did." Moments like these filled the last weeks before the concert. Small victories, quiet breakthroughs, growing trust. And somewhere along the way, without even noticing when it began, she stopped doubting herself as much. On the night before the concert, she stood in the empty music room, pressing her fingers gently on the piano keys. She didn't play. She just listened to the quiet. "Tomorrow," she whispered to herself, "I'll be ready." She didn't know what the audience would think. She didn't know if her playing would be perfect. She didn't know if she would make mistakes, but she knew one thing with certainty. She wasn't the same person who had been told to stop touching the piano weeks ago. She had found her music again, and tomorrow she would share it. The day of the concert arrived with a quiet kind of excitement that settled over the entire school. Even early in the morning, the halls felt different. Students moved around with a mix of nerves and energy, whispering about the performance later that evening. Teachers carried clipboards and checklists, making sure everything would run smoothly. The auditorium had been cleaned, decorated, and tested for sound. But the one person who felt the weight of the moment more than anyone else was the janitor. She had spent the early hours doing her job, the same way she always did cleaning floors, emptying bins, checking that classrooms were ready. But her mind wasn't on the work. Her hands moved out of habit, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the stage, the piano, and the promise she had made to the students. It was strange for her to think she would be part of something like this. She had never imagined standing on a stage again. And yet here she was, preparing for a moment she didn't see coming, but now couldn't walk away from. All day, students who knew about her performance walked by her with encouraging smiles. Some whispered, "Good luck." Others simply nodded shyly, as if unsure how to speak to her. She responded with a quiet smile each time. By late afternoon, she went home briefly to change. She didn't have anything fancy to wear, just a clean, simple outfit that made her feel comfortable. She looked at herself in the mirror before leaving again, taking a moment to breathe. "You're not doing this for attention," she whispered. "You're doing it for them, for the music." When she returned to the school, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky with warm orange light. The auditorium lights glowed through the windows, and people were already beginning to arrive. Parents, teachers, and younger siblings waited in small lines, chatting softly. She slipped inside through the backstage door. The students were already there, some tuning their instruments, others pacing nervously. The teacher was checking over the program, making sure the order was correct. When he saw her, his whole face brightened. "You made it," he said. She nodded, though her hands were trembling slightly. "Is everyone ready?" "As ready as they can be," he said with a smile. The students noticed her arrival. One by one, they came over to her, offering small words of encouragement. "We're glad you're here. Thank you for playing with us. You make the music feel real." Each sentence felt like a warm hand on her heart. She had never expected to matter this much to anyone, let alone to a group of students who had every reason to see her as just the janitor. She sat quietly with them backstage as the lights in the audience dimmed. The teacher stepped onto the stage to welcome everyone. "Thank you for joining us for this year's spring concert," he said. "Tonight, you'll hear music the students have worked very hard on. But more than that, you'll hear music played with heart, honesty, and courage." She listened from the wings, her hands clasped together tightly. The first few performances went well. The younger students played short, cheerful pieces. The audience applauded loudly. Then came duets and small group performances. Everything moved smoothly. Finally, the teacher announced the final piece of the evening. "This last performance is special," he said. "It isn't only about technical skill, it's about connection. It's about what music becomes when people play from their hearts. Tonight, our students will be joined by someone who reminded us all what true music feels like." Her breath caught in her chest. She stepped forward slowly as the students walked onto the stage. Some of the audience members murmured in surprise, seeing her follow them. She sat at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. The students lifted their instruments. The teacher gave them a small nod from the side. She took a deep breath, and then she played. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but they soon grew stronger, warmer. The students joined in, their music blending with hers. Together, they created something gentle and powerful all at once. It wasn't perfect in a technical sense. One student came in a little late. Another played a note too softly, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the feeling. The music rose like a story. Her hands carried the melody with a depth she hadn't felt in years. The students supported her, trusting her rhythm, following her lead. And as she played, she forgot about the audience. She forgot about her nerves. She forgot about all the years she had been silent. She remembered only the joy. When the final note faded, the auditorium remained quiet for a heartbeat. Then applause filled the room, loud, warm, and full of emotion. The students looked at her with wide smiles. The teacher clapped proudly from the side of the stage. Some audience members stood. She bowed her head slightly, overwhelmed. After the performance, the backstage area buzzed with excitement. Parents congratulated their children. Teachers offered praise. Students gathered around her, talking all at once. That was amazing. You played so beautifully. We couldn't have done it without you. She smiled, though her eyes were starting to sting from emotion. Then the teacher approached her, his voice gentle. You changed them, he said. And you changed me too. She shook her head. I just played. No, he said. You reminded us what music really is. She didn't know how to respond. She simply looked at the piano on the stage, feeling a connection to it she had lost long ago. After the crowd began leaving, she stayed behind to help tidy the backstage area, out of habit more than anything else. She rolled up cords, stacked chairs, and folded stray papers. The teacher watched her for a moment before stepping forward. You know, he said, you don't have to hide in the background anymore. She paused. I'm not hiding. I'm just used to helping. But you can help in bigger ways now, he said softly. She looked at him, confused. What do you mean? I mean, if you ever want to make music a part of your life again, you have a place here. The students adore you. I could use your help in the club every week. And if you want to learn more, grow more, there are programs, opportunities, things we can look into together. She stared at him, surprised by how much hope his words carried. She had never let herself imagine a different path. She had always believed her chance had passed long ago. But now, maybe it hadn't. Maybe the music she thought she had lost was still inside her, waiting. She sat at the edge of the stage once more, staring out at the empty seats like she had weeks before. But this time, it felt different. This time, she didn't feel small. The teacher joined her quietly, sitting a few feet away. You don't have to decide anything tonight, he said. She nodded. I know. But whatever you choose, he continued, just know that you're not alone. We're all here for you. She looked at her. Hands the same hands she had once believed. Would never touch a piano again. I never thought. I'd get this part of myself back, she said. Sometimes, he replied softly. Life brings it back when we least expect it. She took a deep breath, letting the quiet of the auditorium surround her. The night had been full of emotion, fear, joy, and discovery. And now, as she sat on the stage that once intimidated her, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Maybe her future would stay simple. Maybe she would keep working quietly at the school, helping students with their music once a week. Or maybe she would grow bolder, take classes, perform more, explore the part of herself she had pushed aside for years. She didn't know yet, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just the janitor anymore. She was someone who had found her voice again, and she wasn't going to let it go this time.